This past week, the Prime Minister took questions on changes to the carbon tax on home heating oil, reaffirming his stance that this would be the only carve-out.
There will absolutely not be any other carve-outs or suspensions of the price on pollution. This is designed to phase out home heating oil the way we made a decision to phase out coal.
The pause he's talking about there is largely benefiting Atlantic Canada, and that has led to accusations that not all Canadians are being treated equally. At least two premiers have said they are looking into legal options to see if they can stop collecting the tax altogether. One of those voices is the Premier of New Brunswick, Blaine Higgs, and I spoke to him on Friday. Premier Higgs, nice to see you again. Appreciate your time.
You're very welcome, Rosemary.
So obviously you and other Atlantic provinces are benefiting from this change that the federal government has made, suspending the carbon tax on home heating oil for 3 years. And yet you want it to apply for everything and everyone. Why do you want it to be that broad, given that you've sort of come out ahead in this one?
Well, it's about fairness. You know, I guess I haven't been a supporter of the carbon tax from the very beginning.
Yeah.
I don't think it's achieving what was intended. It is certainly impacting a lot of folks negatively. Affordability is a big issue, and the cost of transportation and fuel is a big part of that.
But I understand you're saying it's influencing people negatively, but there is a rebate, and it's a substantial rebate. And since you bought into the federal backstop, people are getting access to that now.
Well, that's true enough, but it is not substantial in the sense of what it's costing people. What we're seeing in every other aspect of inflation, whether it be in groceries, whether it be in the actual fuel or commodities that are purchased. So we've seen, you know, the inflation rates beyond what they've been for a lot of years, and it's directly related to federal policy. So carbon tax is a big part of that. So I guess I just feel there's a lot better way to get major emission reductions in not only our country but around the world.
Okay, what would that be, do you think, in your ideal scenario? What would you like to see used to cut emissions?
Well, certainly if you look at our emissions in Canada, 1.5% of world emissions. And I know if you argue the per capita side of it, you're saying, well, you know, that's an issue. However, we have a very, geographical challenged country in the sense of how our population is spread out. And we don't have in rural New Brunswick, rural Canada, we do not have, transportation system that can be like in the
Sure.
urban centers.
Sure.
But, if you look across the world, you look in Europe, how many coal plants are running, you look in China building 80 to 100 coal plants a year and currently running 1,100. Our natural gas in Europe alone could shut down, tens and hundreds of coal plants. I'm not sure how many are running in Europe, but there are many. And every one that shut down, the emissions are dropped by 50%. In Atlantic Canada, we could shut down 4 coal plants and drop emissions by 50%. That'll do more than any of this policy that's impacting people so negatively.
You said there that the carbon tax is driving inflation, but in fact, the Bank of Canada says that is not the case, that it accounts for 0.15 points of overall inflation. So actually getting rid of the carbon tax would have a very small impact on people's ability to afford things. And then they would also no longer have the rebate.
Well, do you think that's why Trudeau took the 15 cents off of the heating oil, that he thought it would have a real small impact? Or do you think when someone fills up their vehicle and you drop it by 20 cents a liter, $15 on a fill up, and then what transportation costs go to the grocery stores or to the lumber yards?
Sure.
I mean, it doesn't have a small impact on commodity pricing. It's huge on our everyday ability to afford.
But that's about the price of oil. That's about the price of oil. That's not about the carbon tax, is it not?
No, the carbon tax right now is like 15 cents and going higher.
Yeah.
So that coupled with the clean fuel standards, we're talking up in the 20 cents a liter range. That's a huge impact every time you fill up.
So what are you going to do then? You took this federal backstop back in July, and now you have the freeze on home heating oil. What can you do to I guess back up the notion that you don't like this at all anymore and you don't think it's fair?
Well, I don't think I'm alone in the country in that sense.
Sure.
And I sympathize with my colleagues that are on other forms of heating, because we have other forms too here. So broadening it to kind of include all forms at this time, just on heating components, which are so crucial to individuals. I agree with all that. But I would like for us to stop and pause and do an assessment of what the carbon tax implication on citizens across this country has actually achieved. I think it's time to have that scientific look and say, what is our best approach to really having an impact on world climate and emissions?
You know, of course, that your colleague, Premier Moe, is considering not collecting the carbon tax anymore. Would you go that far? Are you considering having the Supreme Court, for instance, look at this once again?
Well, I've asked for a legal opinion on that. So I am asking that question, yes.
You're asking the question about whether you can just stop collecting the tax? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah. Yes, I am asking that question. So, I mean, obviously, I'm not going to break the law on this, so I don't know. And Premier Moe may have already had that answer, but I'm asking our colleagues here, our legal team, what opportunities do we have there?
You mentioned the clean fuel regulations. Those went into effect in July, and you at the time allowed the oil companies to pass on the cost to consumers. Given all that you're saying here about affordability and people struggling, do you now regret that decision, or is there anything you can do to reverse it? Because that too would help people in New Brunswick.
Well, I know that is the message, Rosemary, that I allowed that, but we have 4 provinces in Canada that are regulated. And so Nova Scotia's price went up, PEI's price went up, Newfoundland's price went up because we are a regulated climate. That's why our price went up. So it's not that I allowed anything. It's a case of a regulated price has a formula based to get the retail. And so we have 4. It might beg the question, should we have a regulated pricing formula here in Atlantic Canada? And we are looking into that.
Yeah, and it might also, I guess, beg the question, should these oil companies be doing anything to help people in Atlantic Canada too? And is there anything you can do to pressure them to do that?
I completely agree with that. And I think the U.S. have taken a different approach, right? They're putting the squeeze on big industry, not on individuals that are filling up at the pumps. And I think that is the approach to take.
Let me just quickly ask you about the Canada Pension Plan. As you know, Alberta is now sort of looking at leaving the CPP, or it's at least examining that. How concerned are you about how that could impact your province and what it could mean for the rest of Canada?
Well, I'm very concerned if it becomes it actually unfolds. I'm very concerned about that. But I think that we should just pull back a little bit and say, okay, so why is Premier Smith even considering this? And I would say, you know, in all of this, we've seen federal policies that have negatively impacted Alberta and their growth and the energy supply to all of us in the rest of Canada. Having been a province where we actually, you know, are recipients of equalization payments, it's coming from Ottawa, or it's coming from Alberta. I've said this for a long time. So when I look at this, I'm thinking, well, if we continue to have policies that negatively impact Alberta, they're going to look for ways to mitigate their exposure. I don't want to see this happen. It has a huge impact on us, and I don't think it needs to happen. But I do think we need to look at what we've been doing to Alberta's economy. And when I think of that, you know, Alberta's not trying to leave Canada. The Canadian policies have left Alberta.
Okay, Premier Higgs, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.